Yo, what's up, everybody? This is Alex of Low 5 Gaming with Luke and Alex. We are super excited to bring you this episode on Prince of Persia. So, without further ado, Prince of Persia. Not the new Prince of Persia, but the 1989 Jordan Mechner Prince of Persia. Which is funny to me because our last talk, we covered Super Metroid, and I was throwing it back for that one, and then it was your turn to pick a game.
Yeah, after complaining about how archaic your game was, I really decided
So
to...
we threw it way back.
Yeah, even further back. Even harder, potentially.
Well, cool, man. Let's tell everybody why we chose it, though. Why'd you go with Prince of Persia to focus for this month, or this past month?
So we do have a history with this game that's kind of fun and delightful to dig up. Shouts out to floppy disks out there in all the landfills or wherever these floppy disks are at. But this is...
Not to be confused with, okay, there's different kinds of floppy disks, and let's get in the nitty-gritty, dude.
Get them, Grandpa. You get them, Grandpa.
We got
you
the
let them
original
know.
big ones that are like 5 inches or whatever. They're the real floppy, they flopped around, right? So this would be the 3.5-inch hard plastic floppy disk. But
Hit them with those specs.
Shout
Hell
out, though,
yeah.
for sure. Some old technology that you do not see around anymore.
So we had a family computer, which, many delightful stories there. But we had a family computer and early games, so I don't even have much. Like, these memories are all very fuzzy. And I guess we got this floppy disk from a cousin. And I don't know, did we have the full game or did we have one of those trials?
You know, I was thinking about this today.
It's a shareware thing.
Right, I was thinking about that
Yeah.
today, and I'm not sure if it was shareware or not. But what I can tell you is it was the full game.
Okay.
But here's the caveat: is that
It's
different.
caveat, but continue. With your bougie ass. But continue.
But the deal is, so when you played it, though, I think you could play up through maybe the first or second level.
Yeah. No, I
but
definitely plan
then-
on hitting this, but yeah, continue.
but then you had to reference the manual to proceed. So, like, they would, a screen would come up, or basically there was a bunch of different potions, and you would
All
have to
numbers
select
above 'em,
right. So you
colors
would
and
have to
shit.
reference the manual to whatever they're asking you in the game to do the right potion, and if you didn't pick the right potion, you would straight up just die. So I think we ended up getting like a copied version of the manual, or maybe our cousin borrowed us the manual as well.
Yeah. So there's that, and then the neighbor, friend, family as well. They had like an old Apple laptop or something. So I have some confused cross-stream memories of where I was playing it and when I was playing it, and I don't have any concept of my age or really abilities, but the sound, and I don't know if we're gonna have a dedicated moment where we're just gonna talk about like the sound effects of this game, but they're all
Sure.
deeply burned in. The pitter patter of his feet, the door closes, like a little gate shut that you started off in that super crunchy Persian style. Like love the crunchy Persian music that they intro and exit levels with, and the little delightful noises they make. So we played this game as kids. And then it's just always kind of been around, and that's mostly due to my own curiosity of like reaching back. So I'd get a new computer, and at some point in time I'd always like get that itch, and I'd reach back and find a DOS file somewhere on the intranets and play it and get a little further. And all these little things like smacking the tiles above you don't forget where all of those are.
Right.
So the rediscovery of those is kind of funny, and then like your first little sword fight.
Yep.
It's a nice little milestone. So how about you? Do you have any other specific memories you'd like to add there?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So when you decided that you're going to throw it way back,
Right.
I wasn't opposed to it, but I was like, dang, that's a long, I haven't dug up. But so I was excited about it. But it was interesting because it was after our talk about Super Metroid. We fired it up on your computer, and you kind of did a little run through for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to dip my toes in the water, so I was like, I'm not ready. You just play, I'll watch you a little bit.
Yeah, I believe your first comment was something along the lines of how fluid it was, and you're like, "Oh, you were for real been playing this.
Yeah.
Like you got everything timed." And I was like, "Uh-huh."
Yeah, immediately a bunch of memories started coming back, right? Because like you brought up the point that this was a game that was borrowed to us or given to us from a family member. And who knows how old we were at the time. I was probably, I don't know, like maybe 10, 11, 12, something like that. But this is a game that, we have a plethora. There's always been a lot of games out, but like today, there's just so many. So you can play whatever you want. And back then, there was still a lot of games, but you're limited to what you had. There wasn't the internet wasn't the same. In fact, this was maybe I suppose it would be the internet would have been out, but we're talking dial-up.
Yeah, no, screechy noises.
Right.
Aunt coming over to use your computer and printer for like 2 hours when you were trying to game.
So it would have been for us. It would have been the early to mid '90s that we were playing this.
Early
maybe
2000s.
Yeah. What I remember though is playing this, doing run-throughs of this game with some of the neighborhood buddies.
Oh, really?
Like they'd come over and we'd hang out by the computer and we'd just try and get as far as we can. So watching you play that first time actually brought back a lot of that nostalgia and those memories. And it was interesting because you were playing and there's a couple things when you're getting to it, and I was like, oh, isn't there a sword in the next place there? Or like, and then there's a point in the game fairly early on where you meet like the shadow prince or whatever, which is like this reflection of you. So that was interesting. Like I knew that was coming. Like the fat,
dude.
not
the fat swordsman.
The fat swordsman.
Monster. We'll talk about that later.
So I knew he was coming, and there was another thing there's another point.
The skeleton fight.
Right, when you pass the skeleton was around, I was like, oh, I don't trust that thing. Did that thing pop up? And then you're like, you didn't
I really tried to make it, I really tried to downplay it. I was like, no, and then he definitely came up.
And then I was like, so definitely it started, there was a flood of memories, which was instantly a lot of fun, and it made this game, replaying this game, fun as well. So that's kind of the backstory, but I shelved this game. Like, I guess it's one of those things where it's like, maybe I dabbled in a little bit on ports for Nintendo or something like that, but it's definitely not something that I've put a lot of focus on for a long time. So it was fun to go back to.
And that's kind of why I picked it, is because it was deep enough in a mutual nostalgia zone where, like, yes, I had been playing it, but I just kind of wanted to help you or guide you in resurfacing those weird, because, like I said, those like audio in these games, you boot up a classic Mario game, and the first thing you're going to notice is the music and the little sound effects in the first level. And that's usually what most people actually experience the original Marios. They only get past the first level or maybe the second one, right?
Right.
But those musics, they're just so deeply burned into my skull in the strangest type of way. So yeah, so that's the reason I decided to do it here and kind of drag you along there. And then the reason I've been playing this game more so is pandemic related. So unless you live in Florida, we've been in a pandemic for like the last year plus. Shout out, no shout out Florida, but also whatever. So, and I got this new gaming laptop we have in front of me. We're not going to open it up because it's a gaming laptop, so that fan just goes hammer time and would probably ruin all the audio. But the first game I actually did is I found a DOS file and I loaded it up on here, and it's so funny, like the base controls of the arrows and shift and everything. So. And then at some point in time, we went to distance learning. And in my advisory, I was just kind of bored, and only one kid would show up. Shouts out to the little homie John. He's the only person that would show up. And one day I was randomly playing it, and I was like, you want to watch me play Prince of Persia? And he was like super excited for it. And like, if we think this is really old, 1989, did you say?
89 is
so
release.
So this is old to us. This kid was born in like something like 04, 05. So like, Lord knows this is like a historical timepiece for him, right? So, and he'd always call it speed running, and we'll kind of get to that later. Not too much foreshadowing, but it's something that his generation would certainly be far more into than like us. It's a newer trend, and I know people our age do it, but you get my point.
It's a newer recorded trend.
Right.
I think people have been pushing through games for a while, but
it's a newer phenomena, like within pop culture gaming.
Definitely.
So. Yeah, so he'd be like, all right, and then the next day I thought that was mostly just like him humoring me, but the next day he's like, so like, you gonna boot up Prince of Persia, dude? So like, and this is deep, like this is over, before winter break, coming out of Thanksgiving, everything due to travel was like extra shut down, so schools went fully distance as opposed to hybrid, and then, we just kind of developed this, as a teacher does with a student often, just kind of like a friendship. Low-key, you see these kids more than pretty much everybody else that you don't live with over the course of the year. So we're just hanging out. Kind of helped me get through it because not a lot of kids are showing up to classes. It was a weird place. You're home all the time, which is cool, but also a little strange. And then, we were just sharing this experience, and it got to the point where I couldn't do it in advisory anymore because the game is on a 1-hour timer. And I started to get good enough and far enough where I was like, bro, you got to get the first hour. Like, I can't really keep you here in good conscience. Like, I have a class to teach. Like, we got to get you out of there. So we had to time it out a little different. And then he's using the school's Chromebook. So they block everything, including Google Maps. So there's just some random beef with school censorship. But it was fun. The first day back, I was able to, an advisory, put it in front of him. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's your turn, bud. And he was kind of excited. He's like, oh, cool. And it was amazing for me to watch him die in all the most obvious pitfalls.
Sure.
Because, like, he'd been talking so much trash about any time I died. And, like, how'd you get stuck on that again? So it was so funny to watch him kind of stumble through it and try to remember what he had seen me do.
Right.
Try to figure it out himself. So occasionally when he's not too sleepy, because, teenager, I'll throw it in front of an advisory and just kind of check in, see how he's doing. He's been able to get through the first few levels. So
that's cool.
Yeah, no, it was a fun experience to, especially because, I'm a younger brother talking to my older brother about this shared experience that was basically passed down to me. So it's very much like that as well.
Right, right.
So, there's a cute little bow to the end of that story.
No, I dig it, man. Yeah. I think that will lead us nicely into talking a little bit about the game itself. But first, I just want to point out that this game is a bit older. 1989 is the release. Mm-hmm. Designed, made, programmed, and everything by Jordan Mechner, who was kind of a pioneer in this that realm at the time, I guess you could say.
Early PC gaming, yeah.
Right. So this was dropped on the Apple II system as well as DOS, and apparently didn't sell super well at the time.
Yeah.
Until it started getting ported to pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So it's been ported. I mean, if you can think of a retro video gaming system, it's probably been ported to it. And that's when it started to increase the sales and really become more of a cultural phenomenon, is when it got added to, for example, Nintendo.
Yeah, you had it on Game Boy. What were you able to track down in the process?
Right, so, yep. So it's got a Game Boy port, a Game Boy Color port, a Sega Genesis port, Nintendo port, Super Nintendo port. And they all are fairly, pretty darn faithful to the DOS version or the Apple II version, with the exception of Super Nintendos. So Super Nintendo has upgraded graphics, but they also changed the layout and the maps.
Oh, really?
Which is interesting, and they've added 30 minutes to the timer. Oh. So it's a kind of a different game, but it does critically, it did decently, and it's a lot of people do enjoy that version of it, but it's not true. It's not true Prince of Persia.
No, and I even get mad. You can get it on the Microsoft Store for free with advertisements, but just take off the advertisements because they're very, in my opinion, clickbaity, exploitative. Like, your computer has a virus.
And I think it was $2, right?
Yeah, it was nothing. Mm-hmm. But it's funny, I don't like that version as much as I was liking the DOS I was playing it off of.
But I thought it was the DOS version, though.
It was slightly different feedback, I swear.
That's
and
interesting.
I switch between them sometimes.
Yeah.
I swear I can tell. But yeah, no, sorry to interrupt. But
no, that's cool.
Some of the other ones are more towards the Prince of Persia 2 stylings. I noticed that when you'd show me pictures of the different ports, is the updated had that more rounded look, and then
right. Yeah, so on all the different ports, they're not going to be, they're all have their slight differences, which is actually interesting. So I did jump around. I also have the gaming PC, which is funny because it's this beast of a machine, and here I am playing Super Metroid on it via the SNES Mini, and now playing this old DOS game. So this thing can handle games like Cyberpunk pretty well. And here I am playing a 1989 Prince of Persia.
Dang near $2,000 gaming laptop. And the first thing I got to boot up is 1989's Persian classic.
Nonetheless, though, it was interesting to jump between the different ports. So I actually played the majority of my time. I played it on that Windows 10 version that you can get from the Windows Store. Mm-hmm. But when I wasn't playing that one, I actually found myself playing a Nintendo port via a ROM in an emulator.
Sure.
Which is interesting because the graphics are slightly different in you bring up the point that even between the DOS version that you found online and the Windows 10, there are slightly different controls. So that's also the case with all these different ports. So granted that with the Nintendo ROM that I was playing, I would use a controller. So that was a different experience in itself than the keyboard. But also just some of the way that you step, the way that you run, jump, it's all slightly different. And the controls are then in turn different because there's swordplay in this. Mind you, it's not like super
it's pretty
fancy,
intense, dog. Speak for yourself.
But so there's but what I did notice is the difference in these ports that was difficult for me is that if I was playing the Windows 10, you're using the arrow keys, the space bar, and I think the shift key are the primary buttons. Whereas if you're using a Nintendo controller, you've got the directional pad and then B and A. But I did notice that, for instance, when you're playing on DOS, you're holding shift to make him take a smaller step. Whereas I think you're holding B in the Nintendo version, which isn't that big of a leap, but then there's just other things if you want to hold on to a ledge, you also hold shift, I think, and then it's On the Nintendo version, you can also press A or B. It just like got a little confusing, but
That's actually a nice transition as far as like what is the game, especially if you have most of your Prince of Persia memory. I mean the what is it? The following games was the predecessors. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Here? The predecessors, the modern 3D action platforming, they're far more popular through Ubisoft. So like it's definitely worth going through like what is this game for those who weren't playing crunchy PC early games.
Sure.
But like it is a 2D action platformer, and what you're saying with the different timing and how many steps it takes, the game is very precise in a sloppy type of way. Like your character's kind of floaty.
Sure.
He slips, he slides, but in a very confined way. So like I almost find it very interesting to learning like a keyboard or like base games, like because you just have those arrows, and it's not just a platformer, and that has to do with like the action. So those sword fighting sequences,
Sure.
which are pretty sweet. I mean, all you really have is like a combination of blocking and attacking. So if you press up, he does a bit of a parry, but like the way the game can kind of like it's a little deeper. It's not the deepest puddle, right? But it's a little deeper than what you think right on the surface, especially from like a action platformer from 1989.
And there's some interesting elements to it. Like you're on a timer, so you're supposed to try and do your entire run or beat the game within 60 minutes, unless you're playing Super Nintendo. You got an hour and a half.
Yep.
But so you've got the timer.
It's part of the story that we're just not going to go by because you got to save a princess. It's a whole thing.
Well, I actually think that is interesting a little bit because I ended up when you decided that we were going to play this game, I went ahead and got a hold of the official Prince of Persia and Prince of Persia 2: The Shadow and the Flame strategy guide by Russell Demaria, I believe his name is. I may have butchered that pronunciation, but the point is, it's actually been a fun book to reference, even though it didn't help me beat the game.
You can see the map, but you still got to hit those nasty gaps and avoid all those things.
Exactly, but what was very interesting is the author of this walkthrough worked with Jordan Mechner to almost give more meat to the story, right? So this strategy guide that I have gives kind of an intro and outro, and then the walkthrough itself it's been storyized. It's been given a story, right? So like. But when you first fire up this game, it does give you a very little bit of a backstory. Essentially, you're Aladdin.
Yes.
And which is, when I was playing this and thinking about this and reading a little bit about the story in the strategy guide, I didn't dig super deep into this, but it did start me thinking on this idea of like the story of Aladdin and how that's been told throughout time, different ways. And I think that the Prince of Persia kind of pulls up on that. It's an old story, but basically you're this pauper that comes into this new kingdom. The Sultan is gone. Jafar is there at the palace in his stead, and Jafar is captured a princess and basically forcing her to marry him. And you, the hero of the story, the person you're playing as, has to save the princess, right?
With the classic like sand dial time or whatever you call those, like from like those board where you flip it and all the sands go by, so you got like an hour or so. Yeah,
and that's pretty much the breakdown of the intro that the game gives you, which you mentioned you skip every time because you're like, I get it, save the princess, whatever, which is fair.
/ I ain't ever getting to Jafar. It's whatever.
For real.
I ain't getting there. So
maybe but the strategy guide does add an element of story to that. It gives it a little bit more.
It's a very narrative guide. I've never seen that.
Yeah, which
I
is
didn't
cool,
read
I
it,
think.
but like just in flipping through, I'm like, what's going on here?
Right.
Like, yeah. So that's when you explained it to me Yeah.
But yeah, so the story, it just gives a little more meat to the story. It doesn't change it up much, but it's the main idea is you're trying to escape this dungeon that Jafar has thrown you in and save the princess so you can marry her and live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it's like it's this 2D action platformer, but that's almost not fair because like what we think of that is a combination of a few games. Well, let's use Mario. It's the most famous platformer ever, but like in the sense that I view those types of games as like an obstacle course, right? Where it's just like you got to get from the left to the right, and you have to avoid these various obstacles. Where this game is very much a puzzle.
Sure.
Like and this is the goofiest comparison I'll make, but like kind of like Toad Treasure Tracker, where you have like this concealed little like area, and it's just like it's really much about unraveling where everything is and like getting these different things that you need, or like get to point A, and then you can do this, and like you little scratch a little bit here, Metroid style, where you could find out like, oh, that panel hits loose and there's a bigger potion that gives you an extra like heart. So that I found
triangle. but
Oh, is it word? Yeah, I thought it's like a little potion thing or something down at the bottom
that
there.
could be.
No, it is triangles to the side. You're right. But yeah, so there's that, and then there's this like concept of like instead of lives, you have time. Like you can
Right.
die a million times over. Some levels do have checkpoints, but for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, when you die, you'll start right at the beginning of that level. And it's very interesting because it changes the way you play this game. Like the first level, your first time through can take you like 20 minutes, or the first few 2 levels may take you the whole time, and then you
And there's
die.
12 levels in total,
Yep.
which I have not made
yeah,
it to
no,
12.
I-
I think I've made it to like 4.
I can recut a new podcast when I get to 9, but 8's brutal. But like it teaches you to play in a different type of way,
Sure.
which I find very unique for that era, and that's why I found this game to be kind of prominent in my mind. Like it is different because like at this point I can breeze through those levels, but it's I don't know. So we talked about how speedrunning's like more of a thing now, especially popular, but people have been doing it forever. Like this game kind of teaches you the principles of it. How do you
Yeah,
get through
I
this
suppose.
as fast as possible?
Because you're on the timer.
You're on the timer, and you want to get to like those harder levels. You're gonna need extra time.
Right.
So the quickest you can get through those early levels, the better.
Sure.
So it's very much teaches you to like kind of master it. Like death is no longer an obstacle in this game. Death is just kind of like something you accept.
Which is interesting. It almost like plays into some of those roguelike aspects that we see in a lot of games, or in the roguelike genre, I guess.
Yeah. Where it's like death is just part of the experience,
Right.
and like you shouldn't really fear it. It's just gonna keep happening, and you just that's how you measure all those jumps, and you.
And I
get
think
past
this is
those.
a perfect time to mention the fact that eventually Jordan Mechner did work with, he's like sold the rights. I don't know how this, I don't have all the details on this, but basically they made a movie, right? So we've got the Sands of Time.
Shouts out to the very much not Iranian Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah. Hey, which is also worth mentioning that your guy, the Prince of Persia, is super white and doesn't make any sense.
I forgot to mention that. So here's this week's history corner. Here's me pouring some water like teacher guy getting ready for a long rant here. History corner. Persia is the ancient name of modern day Iran. So if you don't know, it's one of the oldest civilizations in the history of the world. I mean, you got your cradles of the earth, Mesopotamia, you got China, you got India, and you got Iran.
Sure.
It's one of the, if you know math, you can thank some Persians.
Right, you're right on.
So it's modern day Iran, and they're very much Middle Easterners, and like they are not Arabic. Never say that; you'll get in some trouble with some Iranians. So there's just some life tips. But the game, you're very much a white guy
Totally.
in this all white outfit. Is he even blonde? I should pull it up. 'cause
he's blonde, dude.
Yeah. So like it's all wrong, right?
So if it bugged you that Jake Gyllenhaal was the Prince in the Prince of Persia movie,
Yeah.
then it's gonna bug you that this
is
will
gonna be
even
this,
worse.
It's just that's how you know it was made by a white dude because he ain't
Totally.
thinking through it all right. And then what makes it problematic though is that everyone is not white.
Right.
The enemy swordsmen you face are like darker skinned, and like
Yeah.
that's troubling, right?
What's the deal, Jordan?
Yeah, come on now. So like it's like he did know of shades, but it's funny that he's got like these super like the bad guys are all like I don't even know how to describe that attire, but like turbans and like swords, very Sultan like henchmen
Harem
like
pants.
yeah. So like I don't think he was trying to make a political statement for the game.
It was 89. It was a different time.
Right.
Not,
So I'm not canceling 1989's Prince of Persia, but like I did have a laugh going through it with modern sensibilities, and I was like, wow, okay.
and I'm not sure the year, but the Super Nintendo port that I mentioned, the
they upgrade
hero
it?
is a slightly darker shade, which
There you
I
go.
think is progress.
Sure. Sure. So actually playing the game, going through it, what it's like during our modern sensibilities, I'm going to open up by saying it holds up great.
Right on.
It
Yeah.
fights right in the modern landscape. Like these types of games are kind of popular almost with the different art style throwbacks.
Sure.
Like, so I thought that. And then the crunchy
Totally.
tunes, man.
Yep.
Those tunes are so
Those
crunchy.
MIDI tunes.
Yeah.
I want to mention too is earlier you compared this game. Well, it's a 2D action platformer,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then obviously we're going to compare it to Mario. Now, for those, I'm going to just go out there on a limb and say you're probably familiar with Mario. But
Yeah.
so if you're familiar with Mario, you know that there's a start and a finish, and you move left to right for the original ones, anyways.
Yeah.
Now with Prince of Persia, it's interesting because you go left, right, back, forth, and
Yeah,
you
you're
can,
in a little puzzle box,
right?
kinda
So
like
like
earlier.
even though you're on a timer, like you are in Mario, you are able to go back and forth, and whereas Mario, the screen is locked, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to continue to progress. So I
Yeah.
think that's interesting and does play into this idea that you were kind of teasing with the whole speed running. It's like, because once you understand this game, you can cut through that thing really fast.
You're on a beeline, absolutely.
Right,
There's like the exploratory phase,
right,
where you're digging and you're trying to figure out each level, and it's like, I actually really liked that.
Sure.
Like when I got to the levels I had never been able to get to as a kid, I'm like, okay, now we're in completely foreign territory. Sure. So it was very much like a different game. So the game changes, right? Like you have your first playthrough, it's just very exploratory, it's taking your time, it's unlocking the puzzle, and then it turns into that speed run. So that's like a very cool transition for such like an old game. It's
totally
a cool concept, yeah.
And the the art is simple. It is based off of the the programming and the technologies and that we had for the DOS and the Apple II systems. But it's also like it's kind of like pretty.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
You start off in like kind of a simple dungeon, but like later you do enter the palace, and like some of the artwork and stuff is
when you change up to the palace and the brightness comes in, like that's an exciting moment. I can imagine the first time doing that in that era. Like I don't know what the screen colors were like, but it was really cool. And like the doors.
Yep.
The doors are very pretty, and they do use like actual Persian architecture.
Yeah, which is
for some of the artwork. Kind of dope, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm gonna mention like the game is very much obviously like he built the game for it to be fun, but like these are the strangest dungeons I've ever seen constructed.
Totally.
Like huge pillars that lead nowhere, and like
Sultan had a lot of time figure out how to torture his people.
Some interesting architects.
Let's mention too, so that we're talking about playthrough, we're talking about this side-scrolling, back and forth 2D platformer, and we've mentioned the sword play. So there are enemies that you sword fight with, but there's also other obstacles. So you're doing a lot of jumps. You're jumping over pits.
Obstacles are classic.
Right?
Love them.
So you've got your standard pits, or like you basically, if you fall too far, you die.
Right. He makes a horrifying noise as he splats.
Yeah, some of those sound effects are pretty gnarly. There's also spikes. You can either fall into spikes, or you can go through like a spike pit where spikes will shoot up into the air and basically impale and kill your character.
Very horrifying, but once again tight.
And the other major obstacle / baddie is the chomping, like, what would you even call those? It's like a guillotine almost.
It's like a guillotine door. Like very creative architects up in these dungeons, but that's a nice little moment.
Sometimes in succession too, so like it might be a few that you have to make your way through.
And if we're talking about speed running, like they'll slow you down. You have to tiptoe. You gotta do the jump. You gotta time it out, right? And then we can zip back to the nostalgia zone. Our grandfather put like on his steps this weird little, like, I'm not gonna call it a blade, but it was like a piece of metal that like shot up like, I want to say 4 inches at least.
It's a shoe scraper to get dirt off, mud off your foot.
Yep. And it was in between like a slanting rail down. So as a kid who was bored at my grandparents' house, I was definitely role playing myself as the prince, and I would like go in between that all the time, pretending that I was narrowly escaping those chomps, and like. That is so dorky, and that's why I love this game so much, is because when it gets burned into this nostalgia zone to such a degree, you have these moments where you're like, that is delightfully dorky, and then this super menacing chomp that comes through is kind of a fun obstacle. And also I'll mention that there's nothing more gratifying than in a sword fight just blocking the dude back, and like so and then getting them to get chomped in the chomp is just very gratifying.
So that's cool. I also noticed when I was sword fighting, I really I was a lot better at it on the Windows 10 DOS version that I was playing, as opposed to a lot of the other ports that I tried. But you can get kind of like, even though it's very simple, you've got a parry, a slash, and then you can step forward and back, and that's pretty much all you do. So you get to do a bit of a flow when you're trying to figure out, when you're attacking these baddies or whatever, and they're attacking you. But you can definitely parry and kind of push them off a ledge, like keep a step forward until you run out of room, and then
send them into the spiky pits. That's once again very gratifying.
There's that. I also noticed that if you crowd them, you can get to the other side of them. I don't know if you ever fight that way.
Oh yeah, that's how you got to beat that big fatty sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, no. You got to push him into that pit, or else you're just going to get smacked up.
Dude, he's a gnarly sword fighter. That's actually as far as I got on this run, and I didn't get any further than that, really. But there's definitely, I would say he's a choke point.
Yep.
There is, we mentioned, and granted we haven't made it all the way through, so there's probably a couple more, but that reflection is another person or another like baddie that you have to fight. Who are some of the other what are some of the other obstacles and or enemies that really are choke points for you?
So definitely gonna have to run through this with like a record so we can give you some sweet visuals. But I think like the first really cool like game design shouts out to Mario Maker 2 because when you're like creating those levels, you very much are like timing like how doable is this jump. So level one's pretty easy. You head to the left, you find your sword, you head all the way back to the right, and then the sword fight's just ridiculously easy. If you're gonna pick up this game, anytime your opponent's elbow moves, your animation is faster than theirs. So you can usually hit him first. That's not perfect with that big baddie. And he actually like the chain of combos, like this game almost has combos because he'll parry and then you'll parry and it'll be like the sound effects like tink 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 and then someone gets hit and it's actually really cool and it looks great
And it flashes a little bit, so it's different flashes depending on whether you
their
hit the
color.
enemy.
No, so and then the sound of them getting hit is once again the audio in this game is very gratifying. Level 2, I'd say. So level 1's pretty cut and clean. You go head to the left, you find your sword, and like the cool crunchy noise. You head all the way back the same area that you came from. There's some stupid extra little potions if you got hurt, but that's pretty much it, right?
Right.
And then level 2, the first you start off with a sword fight. That guy's fine. But the first thing that I find pretty cool is you have this big ledge you jump off. And down below, you can see the sword fighter waiting for you. So like, you have to jump in such a way that the second you land, he comes charging at you. And he's intentionally pushing you off another ledge that you land in some spikes. So like your first time through, you're probably going to die to him a bunch of times. And with that student I watched play, it was awesome watching him try to like, because he'd run and get the running jump and then he'd run into the guy. And if you don't have your sword pulled, they one hit kill you. So when you run into a situation, you have to like have enough time to pull out your sword. So if you tiptoe to the ledge, you do the standing long jump, you'll land with just enough space where you'll pull out your sword and you smack shift right away, he hits him, and then you have the advantage. Whereas if you let him sneak up on you or whatever, he's going to knock you off most times. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then at the end of level 2, there's like this one big jump where they're kind of teaching you that you got to hold shift to like hold onto a ledge. So a playthrough like a year ago when I couldn't remember how to do that, I had to watch somebody play it because I was like, I'm pretty sure you can grab this ledge, and I just couldn't figure it out. So that's a big deal. And then I could keep going, but I'm gonna zip through to like the really big jump in level 3.
Okay.
Where you gotta grab that door as it's closing and then sneak through, and that's what leads into the skeleton fight eventually. The skeleton fight's really cool too. And then the Sultan, that sword fight's crazy.
Sure.
He's so hard, and like he always hits you, and like it's best to try to get to the side of him and either just run away because you can do that.
You can do that in a couple.
Or you can try to hit him in the hole, but like you'll die a lot to him if you're not super patient.
Yeah, and patience is a funny thing because you mentioned that because this game, even though you're on a timer, so I think the timer for me when I play it makes me want to just run through this game. That said, you're going to have a lot better time if you take your time and kind of poke around a little bit and figure out your flow and try and make those jumps. Whereas I play Mario this way too, where it's like I'm just trying to run through that level as fast as possible, probably because I played it so many times.
Yeah.
But when I realized that I would be able to progress further in this game if I just took my time, that was kind of a changing point where it's like, okay, I don't have to try and tear through this because I'm actually going to get further if I take my time to do that. Because there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of visual cue signposting. Like if you jump, it might shake a little tile on the top of the ceiling. Then you can realize that you can go up and, once you tap that thing and have it drop, you can go up there, that type of deal.
Extra potions either to heal you or like give you an extra health bar. Yeah.
And then there's other things like you step on a tile, it might close one of the doors that you're trying to get through, so you have to be careful of that kind of stuff. So
they make you time your jumps all the time.
Totally. So it's interesting.
But then you die on something small, and it just makes you rage, and you try to catch up to that exact moment, and then you die on a different thing that's super small. You made it to the fat guy.
Yeah.
Did you finish that level, or could you not beat him?
I think he knocked me into the pit a couple of times. Basically, my sword fighting skills are shit, so he got me there a couple times.
And he's tough. So you, at the end of that level, you make this big jump, and then your evil little shadow twin, whatever that is, I'll figure it out someday when I beat the game, right? He steps on this thing which shuts the door. You catch the ledge, he shuts it, you have to let go. And then level 7 starts with you falling to a horrible death unless you grab the ledge.
Oh, gnarly.
Which is, it's hilarious because if you're not paying attention, you'll be like, splat.
Right.
And then it just starts again at the top level.
Over and over.
Splat, yeah. So then you got to grab it, and then you go through that level, which isn't insanely hard, but like it trips you up on like the dumbest stuff, and like so you're like, ugh, like I knew that was coming. I can't believe I let that. And it's like it's hard, obviously, or else you'd breeze through it. But it doesn't feel hard. You're like, no, I know I can do this. Just like stay patient. And then you get to level 8.
Sure.
And we're not gonna go break down by each level. I mean, that could be a separate fun time, especially to do with the audio or the visuals. But like the 8th level is when things will really get brutal, and I can't beat it.
Sure.
I've tried it quite a handful of times, both in my time in advisory and in school trying to do this, and for this playthrough, I certainly tried to beat it. I considered buying the save states.
I was going to say, this is you playing in the Pierce form, right? So there's no save states, and I don't think on the DOS version it gives you passcodes as you progress, does it?
No, not that I know
Okay,
of.
so like in the Nintendo version and a couple of the other ports, if you beat a level, it gives you a password.
Yeah.
So you can actually enter that password, and it will bring you to that level.
Oh, word.
Later on, so that helps you move through the game a little bit quicker. But like I said, you're playing the Pierce farm, so that's kind of cool.
I'm out here on this brutal energy here.
Yeah, so every time that you picked it up, you started to from ground 1 all the way to like level 8 or whatever, right?
And if I was dedicated to and if I was dedicated to beat this game, I probably would have bought the save states.
Sure. Yeah,
on Microsoft. It's like $5, and that's that's not much, but it's kind of like it wasn't like a full send like the $2. What's the difference out of whatever? But like I was like. So yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of like I do kind of want to chase this ghost though. So like the idea of beating it in that way like wasn't gratifying. Like I'd rather come into this being like I still can't get past level 8.
Sure.
But there's a baddie you face right away where he no longer steps towards you.
Okay.
Every time you step towards him, he takes a stab at you. So you have to adapt the strategy of like stepping forward, and as you step forward, lifting your parry blade up, and then. You can basically, the best thing you can do is just keep trying to block and knock him back. Like, forcing him to block you will knock him back. So you have to try to knock him into these spikes. And he's actually one of the toughest dudes in the whole game other than the big fat guy. So it's him. And then that level's just so brutal. Like, you go all the way, and then there's this period of time where you hit a tile that like drops a door, but it's not like permanent, it's on a timer, and you have to run back through all these chomps, and like I've only gotten to that point once.
It also goes slice you in half.
Yes. No, and you just get to sit there as your little pool of non-great blood is just sitting there, and you're so mad, and you have to fight that one guy I just described. So it's not like this, I'll just get right back to it. It's like, I've only made it to that point once.
Sure.
And at that time, to get to level 8, you've dealt with a lot of stuff. You're not exactly patient anymore.
Yeah.
So like I'd like to beat this someday, but oof, I hope that that's like an intense difficulty spike, and that 9 through 12 are maybe forgiving, but like no thanks.
So what I'm hearing is you didn't beat this game, but it's still on. It's on that backlog. You want to check it off at some point in time.
So the nature of my relationship with this game, as previously discussed, it's just kind of funny for me to have.
Luke's going to be like an 89-year-old man trying to get
pass
past
this
level
on
8.
to my children. Yeah, no, like it's just so funny to just kind of return to it and return to that place and hear those crunchy sounds. Like it's just a nostalgic game, and I don't do that with a lot of games actually. Like I'm never the dude who rewatches movies. Like I'm just not a recap guy. So like it's
talked
funny.
about this a little bit the last time when we went with Super Metroid, and I think it's really interesting because I think that there was a period in time where I personally was that guy because that's what we had, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
the availability.
like, right. Yeah. So like I would watch Star Wars like 3 times a week, because that's the media that I was like into, but also we had it,
Yeah.
Same with Prince of Persia. Like the thing is like we're playing this game and we played it a lot because we had it, and we had a handful of other good games too. But now we've got Xbox Game Pass. I've got 40 some odd Switch games.
Steam sales just assaulting my wallet.
Right. So it's like there's a plethora of content that I feel
Epic begging us to download games for free. I guess.
Yeah, I know, right? But that's the thing, I think it's harder to, or I don't know if it's harder, but it's the way that society has moved forward. There's just this plethora of games, and it's so much easier to jump, at least for me, to jump around and dabble in different things as opposed to really focusing on and beating something, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, is because it's really, that it's forced me to dedicate time to a game that, whether it's this one or last month's Super Metroid, this month we're playing Hades.
So no longer super old, frustrating.
Right, we
games.
brought it back up to the current times.
New, brutal but gentle games.
Right, but it's been nice. It's been cool to try and focus on something, and it's interesting for me to hear that you will continue to play this throughout time, because it is for me as well a game that I think I will have some fun firing up from time to time. I don't know if I'm gonna go all in and like try and beat it, but it's definitely a game that playing it made me realize that it was definitely fun to tap into some of that nostalgia from back in the day, playing with homies around the block.
It's part of your little, to use an overly fancy word, it's part of your gaming zeitgeist, my guy.
Yeah, no,
it's
totally.
just kind of part of the ethos of what made us gamers. And yeah, I mean, it is fun to, like with the podcast, it is fun to have a mission when you're playing a game, other than pure joy, which sounds silly as hell because like we enjoy playing games, but like when you have all these selections and you have all these games in front of you, it's just kind of fun to get that little extra push.
Right. And I had actually, on eBay, I had found there's a Game Boy Color. I think I tried to get a Game Boy Color copy. Long story short is it never sent. I don't know. Whatever happened with that
That
seller.
market's exploding right now, too. So.
But yeah, so, but I bring that up because I think that I will continue to play this on the DOS via Windows 10 version. From time to time, but I would also like to get a hold of the Sega Genesis version because as opposed to the Super Nintendo, which I mentioned, which changed up the game a little bit, the Sega one stays true to its pure 60-minute form. Don't quote me on that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that it is that the Super Nintendo one's the only one that really switched it up. But the Sega has the increased graphics, but with like that original gameplay, and it's just another great excuse for me to bust out that Sega from time to time.
That's like our oldest working like artifact from our childhood.
The Sega Genesis?
Shouts out to moms who get rid of shit at garage sales.
Yeah.
We said we're going to swear less, but we can swear at moms who get rid of shit at garage sales. Shoot.
Genesis for sure. I still have my original DMG Game Boy. But that was that was like really more...
that was a you thing.
Right, because for our age, because what do we have, 6 to 8 years between us? 6 years. So, like, I mean, I was probably, 6 to 8 years old playing the DMG Game Boy. So you were just born.
Yeah,
so
word. And it was around, but I think we had like a Game Boy Color, so it was just like this cute little, like, I remember thinking it looked archaic as a kid.
Yeah,
it was like big and clunky.
But the Genesis for sure is the remaining system from one of our first systems. So
yeah. So to wrap up all of our wistful thinking of the past, I mean, we think about the legacy of this game and an eye towards the future. Another big reason to pick it was that in the news, it's been delayed recently, sad news, but they're making a remake of for sure, right? So the Ubisoft Studios in India, I'm forgetting the specific city, but they are in charge of the Sands of Time remake. Sands of Time was those 3D ones, far more popular.
Right, a lot of people love those.
That's kind of like what the Jake Gyllenhaal movie was based off of, more so than this. So those games they were like a big blockbuster, and it was like a, your modern day, to use the same developer, how they kind of just like their modern day IP is like mostly Assassin's Creed, and how they've kind of left that IP behind. Which I find interesting because, like, as a social studies guy, like, there's a big long rant I won't do here, but like a lot of the reasons I'm into social studies is how like video games kind of introduced me to different cultures and ideas.
Sure.
So like this game, we talked about the artwork and the music. Like I didn't have a lot to connect it to, but it did kind of get me on that curiosity.
Oh, right on.
So as we move forward and hopefully as this game and franchise gets new life, just kind of want to remember the OG there. So like, I'll be very excited for the remake. I love the idea that it's being handled by that studio. Geographically, India is particularly close to Iran. Like it's not going to be made in Iran. There's lots of reasons for that. But so like culturally, I think it's cool that it's being headed by a studio in the region, right? And then like it's just a project people seem to be really excited for, to bring that back, that GameCube era, because if we're talking landscapes of what was cool at what time, like the GameCube was very much my middle school, so like I never played those games, so I'll be really pumped.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's
cool. I will mention too, I don't have all the details, but Ubisoft got a hold of this IP a while ago. So Jordan Mechner, he kind of designed this for Prince of Persia 2, which we didn't talk about too much, but it's a follow-up game that he designed and worked on that game as well, but he didn't actually code that one, whereas I'm pretty sure he coded this one, probably did all this on... I shouldn't say that for sure, but I do think that it was like a solo project for the first one, and it kind of grew into a bigger thing, and eventually Ubisoft came in and did a rework of the original Prince of Persia. When I was trying to figure out what platform to play it on, they have an iPad version, which is the original game, but it's been polished. Unfortunately, it's one of those deals like that you run into with digital media, whereas the version of the iPad game that they made is too old to run on my newer iPad. So it's like,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so 1 and 2.
But Ubisoft's been on
Two's
the
cool.
game for a while.
Quick
now.
shout out to 2. I think if we're talking the Aladdin, I think 2 is very much like more towards like Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Like,
Sure.
I'm pretty sure that's its.
And I flipped through this guide. I mentioned the guide
Cultural
has
landmark.
both games in there, and even though the guide is in black and white, I have fired up 2 just to see what it's like, and the color is really cool, and I can just tell that game, they took it to the next level.
It's more
which makes
cinematic.
sense. Mm-hmm.
Like the first, you jump out of a window and immediately have to whip out your sword. But
Right.
You hit the dudes once.
It's
and they
hard.
Go, yes. You hit the dudes once and they go flying off the ledge like, yeah. So like, it's very much a little bit more of like your modern day action, like movie intro scene. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's cute. It's kind of cool.
Right on. Yeah, dude.
But now
Prince of Persia.
this is where we're gonna play some outro. We'll give you the crunchy music for the outro, and then to the next segment. This podcast is unofficially brought to you by the new McDonald's chicken sandwich. Kind of smacks though, I ain't gonna lie.
That fire chicken or spicy chicken?
Of the 3, and yes, I've had all 3 already.
Oh boy.
At 3 separate occasions. It's McDonald's. You end up there whether you want to or not. I think they own the title for that. But as a fast food restaurant, right, they have great quality control versus like, you know, like a Burger King, not to throw unnecessary shade on their dead corpse. But like, I don't know, man. If you're just like, I don't want fast food, but they got a solid ass chicken sandwich, shit. If you got them ethics against, you know, Chick-fil-A, maybe you just get that McDonald's chicken sandwich.
What you playing? What you playing other than Prince of Persia?
Look at your big ass list right here. Let's just get through with yours first.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
So the focus was supposed to be Prince of Persia. Like I said, I didn't get in. I definitely got into it, but not in the same way I did with Super Metroid a couple months ago. So it didn't command as much as my
type of
time.
game.
True.
Yeah.
But I also recently imported a new PS Vita from Japan. And I've been playing around with that thing, which is, you know, RIP Vita Store.
The
RIP.
timeliness is kind of funny.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but the Vita actually, you know, I started playing around with it, and there's a lot of really cool games on there, and a lot of games that I, as a gamer, just overlooked. And to be honest, like, I've probably gotten way more into gaming within the past probably 2 to 3 years, and there was a good stretch where I didn't game. So, like, I love handheld gaming, but I totally missed out on the 3DS and Vita time. Like, that's just, like, in my life, I just wasn't playing games.
Now that life will, yeah.
But I have them now,
Get these
and
chunks.
oh, man, I love them.
Yeah.
And on the Vita, I've been playing some really cool games. I got introduced to Bloodstained: Curse of the Moon, which is basically a spiritual successor to Castlevania.
Big
I don't know
fan
if I want to
base.
say.
Big fan
I don't
base
know
there.
if I want to say spiritual successor, but it's basically Castlevania.
Yeah.
But it's Bloodstained. But it's really good, dude. The Vita also was the thing that introduced me to. I hadn't really played much of the roguelike realm, and I think we had Hades on the mind a little bit, but I was also interested in some of these other games because I'd started doing deep dives of like, okay, what are the best Vita games to play?
And the very arcadey experience of a roguelike.
It was perfect on for the handheld for me anyway.
When you're
so,
bouncing between a bunch of games.
yeah, so that's that turned me on to The Binding of Isaac, which is it's a great classic
I still
roguelike.
haven't played it, but many people are upset at me for that.
They're coming out with so Binding of Isaac's interesting because it's the one game, but they've done a bunch of new additions, DLC type things to it. There's a new version of it coming out to Switch soon. That is kind of like the what would you call it? It's the penultimate Binding of Isaac. So I think I might get that for the Switch when it drops, which is coming pretty soon. But so that's been fun. Another roguelike, which is very similar to the same idea as like Enter the Gungeon as Nuclear Throne. That one's been fun to play on the Vita. I mentioned Enter the Gungeon, so I have to bring that up as well. Xbox Game Pass added that. I don't know when, but I realized it was on there.
Great on the Switch, probably its best house.
Yeah, so I actually put it on, I downloaded it for the Game Pass on the PC, and I was like, this game is a game that I need to play. I play it with a controller, so it's but yeah, so I was like, this is a game that I need to have handheld on the Switch. So I ended up buying the physical copy for the Switch. No regrets. So that's another game. But to throw it back to the Vita real quick though, Risk of Rain is one that I got turned on to.
Which is hilarious because I play Risk of Rain 2, which is a big sensation,
Right.
kind of. And it's funny that you're playing the lesser-known original.
Well, so I also decided to go physical for that on the Switch because it was another game that like I was playing on the Vita, but I ended up getting Risk of Rain 2, which came with Risk of Rain 1, which is cool because like they're the same game essentially, but Risk of Rain 2 is a third-person shooter. No, yeah, third-person shooter.
Yeah.
With a lot of the same mechanics as the first one, but
Yeah.
I kind of like that 2D like
It's a
side
little
scroller.
bit more welcoming for you.
Yeah, not to say that I'm not into the second one. I'm just enjoying
Nah,
the
you
first
probably
one.
just suck.
Yeah, there's that too, dude. That's definitely that. Super Stardust Delta is a super fun dual stick shooter, spaceship shooter on the Vita. It was also released to, I believe, the PS3 in the PAL version, of like Japan and Europe, but not in the US. So I was actually hanging out with a homie not too long ago last week, and he had just gotten a hold of Super Stardust Delta for, I believe he was playing on PS4 VR. So I got to play that game in VR, and that was kind of fun. Velocity 2X is another Vita game that's super fun. It's another dual stick kind of. It's a bit of a mesh where it's like a dual stick shooter, another spaceship thing, but then it will also transfer into like a side-scrolling runner of sorts. So that one's been really cool. Left Trousers is another game. See, dude, like I said, this month I was
Man's
all
got like
over the
50
place.
games on his list on the printout here.
Yeah,
He didn't even get to 2 of them.
I know. Super Meat Boy, I don't think I mentioned that yet, so that's been dope. I'm a fan of Celeste, so it was interesting to play Super Meat Boy because that would have been kind of like, that came out quite a bit before that.
Very big deal.
I'm also like have a weird like affinity for the Need for Speed series. So
For a casual.
yeah.
For a casual, this
Right.
man loves his racers.
So I did get a hold of the remake of Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, the remaster of Need for Speed Hot Pursuit on the Switch, because I was like, it dropped, went on sale, and I was like, you know what, I need to be able to race on my Switch. Sure. Enter the Gungeon, I teased that game. Was introduced because of the Game Pass, but I also wanted it on the Switch, so I've been playing that, and that's been a lot of fun.
What was your main?
And Enter the Gungeon?
Yep.
I really like the, I believe she's the hunter and then the marine. I like to go between those two mostly.
Acceptable answers. If you would have said the pilot or the convict, I'd judge you.
Right on.
I suck.
And
I'm a marine guy.
oh, fair.
Yeah,
I mean, he's good.
Yeah, I am.
The only other game that I'll mention, I only have put a couple hours into it,
The
but
only last of 10.
yeah. But Immortals Phoenix Rising, so
takes the cake for game I want to play but won't buy for some reason.
dude, but it's
I'm sure it's great.
So we mentioned Ubisoft earlier, so it's a new IP by Ubisoft, originally titled Gods and Monsters, but they were going to get sued by the Monster Energy
so
drink.
much better of a name. And you know,
Right.
Phoenix Immortals Rising just sounds like some I hated it.
Yeah, dude,
Would have
I
bought
don't
it
know
under
the
Gods
name.
and Monsters
I
already.
know that's not, Gods and Monster was type.
Like
the name.
who did they talk to before they settled on Phoenix? Is it a colon? Immortals Rising?
Let's find out.
Because it's just a disgusting name. It just sounds like an Apple Store game from I just hate it.
Scratch that. It's Immortals Phoenix Rising.
Sure, still stupid.
Yeah, not awesome. Gods and Monsters would have been tighter. Screw you, Monster.
Yeah. Also, do you own the name Monster? It's
Yeah, that is kind of weird, but
whatever.
I will say this: that game, and I'm assuming that it's because they want to turn more people onto the franchise, and it's a new IP for them out of, I want to say, Montreal Ubisoft.
Could be. I know it stems from Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Right. Yep.
The team
So it's the
loved
same
doing
development
so
team.
much historical research around mythology of Greek, and they really, really loved all of that. And
Right.
they were allowed to kind of do more of a passion project, so to speak. So
And this is it.
Yep, which is cool for Ubisoft because, the Ubisoft formula, they get accused, rightfully so, of a lot of things ranging from, horrible workplace allegations all the way down to being kind of monkey-hungry publishers. So it is cool to see them do more of a passion project, let them
Right.
loose creatively.
And I will say, I've only played about an hour of it.
Yeah,
They consistently put this thing on sale,
everywhere. Yep.
whether it's on, I guess it would be Epic, the Epic store probably.
Yep.
But so it's
It's
usually
always on
you can
sale on
find it-
Switch and PlayStation. Though.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find it for 50% off on Epic Game Store, and I've also been able to find a bunch of deals for it for the physical copy of Switch. So I actually bought a copy for the PC and my Switch because it has cross saves, man.
Oh,
And
very cool.
The cross
I didn't know
saves.
that.
So like I was like, it's like I paid full price for the game, but I got 2 versions of it. And,
Have you played it
if I
on the
would've-
PC yet?
I have. So that's actually where I put the majority of the time into it. But like I said, I've only played about an
It's a
hour.
lot better on the PC.
That makes sense because
Graphics
graphic wise
and
are a lot nicer. That type of thing. But I will say the game is like a mesh between Zelda and Assassin's Creed,
Very
and that
prominently
hits
so.
hits like some pretty cool areas for me. So it's super cheeky, which is fun because with the whole like mythological gods and everything, like there's a lot of humor in that. So it's fun. Like the Zeus character is like he's such a clown. Like I don't know. I only played about an hour of it, but I'm looking forward to eventually getting deeper into that game.
I also like how they didn't shy away from their origin material, like as far as like people from the media were like, this looks like Breath of the Wild clone, and they're like, dog, that's like one of the greatest games of all time.
Sure.
Like we can be inspired by a really cool game.
Yep. And there's
takes
definitely elements of Breath of the Wild in there, but
little puzzles
it's
and stuff, yeah.
different enough where
Art,
it does live on its own, I would say. How about you, man? What have you been playing?
What time we got left? I got 2 that I'll prominently mention. First one being PlayStation Plus had their free monthly game. I want to say March. Doesn't really matter. It was for the Final Fantasy VII remake. No history with the Final Fantasy VII. Limited history with Final Fantasy. So
Sure.
someday we might have to crack out the old Final Fantasy X.
I was about to
Because we
say,
have
shut
lots
up.
of stories.
Dog, I don't want to hate on you too much, but we can't crack it out because you lost it.
It might have been me. It might have been me. We'll find out. But yeah, no. So Final Fantasy X. So it's the remake is gorgeous right off the bat.
Final Fantasy VII.
Yep, the remake is gorgeous. It looks like
That's what I've heard.
it looks like it belongs on the 5. So when they revamp it for the 5 and the new Xbox, I can only imagine what she'll look like. But it's kind of funny. They change up your classic JRPG combat or the traditional turn-based stuff in their own way, and that's not new to this. They've been doing that. They've been moving their series towards that. But it's like a cool. The way they do it, I'm definitely not the first or only person to mention all this, but it's very cool. And I'll just say, like, what I can add in my own unique way is just so much, like, so I don't have a history with Final Fantasy outside of 10, right? But,
Sure.
like, so much of 10 and because we played 10 a lot.
Yeah.
We played a ton of it. So, like the summons, when you bring in the summons, some of the music, some of the noises, like, it took me a while to get into it because I'm not much of a JRPG guy, but
same.
and I don't really like to play it after work. It's very much like a weekend game,
Interesting, yeah.
so I don't play it a ton. But it's really cool. It's very cinematic. It's very gorgeous, and just like the noises, the combat, just these things that are more familiar to me than I thought they would be is kind of a trip.
Sure.
So that was kind of funny. And then the second one is it just came out to mixed reviews, which are very appropriate, which would be Evil Genius 2. Alex can attest to this. I'll bombard him with like YouTube links of like the 30 strategy PC city builder games that you need to be excited for next year. And I love those lists, and so I've kind of lusted after Evil Genius 2. So I did that thing where you buy it regardless of its how it's welcomed,
Sure.
regardless of its reviews. You're just kind of like, I decided I was going to buy this a year ago, so fuck it, we're just going to buy it. But it is cool. It's like a base builder more so. So think of like your classic Bond villains, and you are the villain making the evil lair. You take over like basically an abandoned casino, and that's your front.
Okay.
So it's like 2-part. You're trying to meet your own goals. You have like this evil lair that you're building up. You're building rooms. So it's like your classic sim management game where you're expanding your lair, and you set up these hilarious booby traps like I'm talking like in the lines of cheeky or like campy. You got like just giant boxing glove like on a spring that comes out of the wall and like punches the people who are trying to infiltrate your base, like a little freeze ray that will freeze them in place. So you're trying to commit these crimes and like get this global scheme going, and then you're defending your base. And but some of these, so it's gorgeous, right? It's very much like if you enjoyed Bond movies ever. You got laser doors and like steel doors, and you're very much trying to keep them out of your vault.
Okay.
You're trying to keep them out of like your like energy rooms, because they'll cut out the energy to sabotage you and then attack you. So like there's cool elements to it, and I know they send like super agents to you. I haven't gotten that far. The tutorial's quite long. But yeah, if you've ever played like a Bond, or if you ever watched like a Bond movie, especially like the Sean Connery, like campy, sort of serious, but like very much 60s styled cartoony, like
Okay.
it shares as much with Austin Powers as it
Oh,
does
funny.
with like Bond. So
Right.
like you pick from between these 4 evil supervillains, each with their own motivations, and I had to pick like the giant Soviet like evil dictator guy. Like that was pretty funny, and so it's fun. The criticisms of it are very fair though. So like you'll see it get rated anywhere from like a 6 to an 8 if that matters to you, but the criticisms of it are fair. It's not a perfect game, but it is fun and it's unique, and I just kind of like to support that type of effort in studios. So it's only a matter of time before you get trapped into a monthly obligation of learning how to. It'll be like a city builder or some sort of sim
Sure.
management game, because there's
It's coming.
It's coming. We'll see which season I pick, but it's coming. All right,
All right, man. Till next time.
crunchy outro music.
Lo-Fi Gaming is a Studio Lo-Fi production. Our theme music was produced by AJ Norman, and our show art was designed by Studio Day Job. We're an independent podcast and would love if you supported us by listening, subscribing, and sharing us with your friends. Visit us at lo5gaming.com.